Hi, welcome friends to day 14 of Gyan Group. And last time we're reading from the book The Courage to be Disliked. And last time we were reading about uh, from the second chapter, a subchapter which said that life is not a competition and how everybody is equal, um, even a child or an adult, everybody is equal, and there are no really differences, no competitions. And the youth was arguing with the philosopher that, of course, he faces competition, and of course, all of us live in a competitive world. So he says, so the philosopher was trying to tell him that yes, there is competition, but as long as the competition is healthy, as long as the competitor is a comrade, it will bring you a new learning experience, or there will be some learning behind it. But if not that, then there is no learning experience there. Most of the times, the competitor is sort of your own mind trying to pull you down. And he was explaining him how everything is equal and that life is not a competition. And then we now come to another chapter, another subchapter that which reads, "You are the only one worrying about your appearance," which is amazing. So let's read further. Yeah. The philosopher says, let's tie up the loose ends. At the outset, you expressed dissatisfaction with Adler's definition that all problems are interpersonal relationship problems, right? That was the basis of our discussion on feelings of inferiority. So the first chapter began with discussing Adler's philosophy, and the philosopher was telling the youth that how many problems arise with interpersonal relationship problems, and the youth differed from there. That's where he started explaining about inferiority, the feeling of inferiority complex, and superiority complex, and then life is not a competition. So he's just reiterating and connecting everything. Let's tie up the loose ends. At the outset, you expressed dissatisfaction with Adler's definition that all problems are interpersonal relationship problems, right? That was the basis of our discussion on feelings of inferiority. Youth. Yes, that's correct. The subject of feelings of inferiority was too intense, and I was on the verge of forgetting that point. Why did you bring up that the subject in the first place? The philosopher, it is connected with the subject of competition. Please remember that. If there is competition at the core of a person's interpersonal relationships, he will not be able to escape interpersonal relationship problems or escape misfortune. The youth. Why not? Because at the end of a competition, there are winners and losers. Youth, it's perfectly fine to have winners and losers. Philosopher, give some thought to it then. If it were you, specifically, who had a consciousness of being in competition with the people around you, in your relations with them, you will have no choice but to be conscious of victory or defeat. Mr. A got into this famous university. Mr. B found work at that big company, and Mr. C has hooked up with such a nice looking woman. And you'll compare yourself to them and think, this is all I've got. The youth. Ha ha ha. That's very specific, the philosopher. When one is conscious of competition and victory and defeat, it is inevitable that feelings of inferiority will arise because one is constantly comparing oneself to others and thinking, I beat that person or I lost to that person. The inferiority complex and the superiority complex are extensions of that. Now, what kind of being do you think the other person is to you at that point? So, when he's trying to say, when there is victory, defeat, when you think it's competition, what is the other person for you then? The youth says, I don't know, maybe a rival, I guess. The philosopher, no, not a mere rival. Before you know it, you start to see each and every person, everyone in the world as your enemy. My enemy? Asks the youth. The philosopher says, you start to think that people are always looking down on you and treating you with scorn, that they are all enemies who must never be underestimated, who lie in wait for any opening and attack at the drop of a hat. In short, that the world is a terrifying place. Yeah, because in your mind, you're sort of exaggerating it. It becomes very big in your mind because it occupies a lot of space in your mind. Youth, enemies who must never be underestimated. That's who I'm in competition with. Philosopher, that is what is so terrifying about competition. Even if you're not a loser, even if you're someone who keeps on winning, if you are someone who has placed himself in competition, you will never have a moment's peace. You don't want to be a loser, and you always have to keep on winning. If you don't want to be a loser, you have to keep on winning. You can't trust other people. The reason that so many people don't really feel happy while they are building up their success in the eyes of society is that they are living in competition. Because to them, the world is a perilous place that is overflowing with enemies. Youth. I suppose so, but philosopher. But do other people actually look at you so much? Are they really watching you around the clock and lying in wait for the perfect moment to attack you? It seems rather unlikely. A young friend of mine, when he was a teenager, used to spend a lot of time in front of the mirror arranging his hair. And once, when he was doing that, his grandmother said, "You're the only one who's worried about how you look." He says that it got a bit easier for him to deal with life after that. Hey, that's a dig at me, isn't it? Sure, maybe I do see the people around me as enemies. I'm constantly in fear of being attacked, of the arrows that could come flying at me at any moment. I always think that I'm being watched by others, that I'm being subjected to harsh judgment, and that I'm going to be attacked. And it's probably true that this is a self conscious reaction, just like the mirror obsessed teenager. The people of the world aren't paying attention to me. Even if I were to go walking on my hands down the street, they'd take no notice. But I don't know. Are you saying, after all, that my feeling of inferiority is something that I choose, that has some sort of goal, that just doesn't make any sense to me? The philosopher. And why is that? The youth. I have a brother who's 3 years old. I have a brother who's 3 years older than I am. He fits the classic image of the big brother. He always does what other parents say. He excels in his studies and in sports. And he's the very picture of diligence. And from the time I was little, I was always compared to him. He's older and more advanced, so of course I could never beat him at anything. Our parents did not care at all about such circumstances and never gave me any sign of recognition. Whatever I did, I got treated like a child and I was berated at every opportunity and told to be quiet. I learned to keep my feelings to myself. I've lived my life totally steeped in feelings of inferiority, and I had no choice but to be conscious of being in competition with my brother. Philosopher. I see. The youth. Sometimes I think of it like this: I'm like a gourd that grew without getting enough sun. So it is only natural that I'm all twisted up with feelings of inferiority. If there's anyone who could grow straight in such a situation, well, I'd love to meet them. The philosopher. I understand. I really do understand how you feel. Now let's look at competition while taking into consideration your relationship with your brother. If you didn't think with a competition orientation, With regard to your brother and your other interpersonal relationships, how would people seem to you? Youth. Well, my brother is my brother, and I guess other people are another story. Philosopher. No, they should become more positive comrades. The youth. Comrades? Earlier, didn't you say, the philosopher says, earlier, didn't you say, I can't celebrate other people's happiness with all my heart? You think of interpersonal relationships as competition. You perceive other people's happiness as my defeat, and that is why you can't celebrate it. However, once one is released from the schema of competition, the need to triumph over someone disappears. One is also released from the fear that says, maybe I will lose, and one becomes able to celebrate other people's happiness with all one's heart. One may become able to contribute actively to other people's happiness. The person who always has the will to help another in times of need, that is someone who may properly be called your comrade. The youth. The philosopher. Now we want to come to the important part when you're able to truly feel that people are my comrades. Your way of looking at the world will change utterly. No longer will you think that the world as a perilous place or be plagued by needless doubts. The world will appear before you as a safe and pleasant place, and your interpersonal relationship problems will decrease dramatically. Youth, what a happy person you are. But you know that's like a sunflower. It's the reasoning of a sunflower that is bathed in full sunshine every day and nurtured with ample watering. A gourd grown in the dim shade doesn't do so well. Philosopher, you're returning to etiology, that is the attributing of causes again. Youth, oh yes, I sure am. So here he's trying to explain the youth that it's not about um, mm, it's not about looking at others as competition, rival, or the whole world seems to be your rival, and you are somebody who's at a lower rung and somebody else is higher. He's saying that you need people who are comrades that help you to push forward or that really appreciate you for who you are. And it will change the way you look at the world. There will be no place for doubt in such a world because they're essentially people who protect you in a sense, right? And here again, the youth says he blames it back to how he was raised in the childhood, and he says, so going back to cause, going back to trauma or whatever. Raised by strict parents, this is just the conclusion of the chapter. Raised by strict parents, the youth had been oppressed and compared to his elder brother ever since childhood. None of his opinions were ever heard, and he was subjected to the violent words that he was a poor excuse for a little brother. Unable to make friends even at school, he spent all his break time alone in the library, which became his sole place of refuge. This youth, who had passed his early years in such a way, was truly an inhabitant of etiology. That means he was tracing everything back to there is some cause or something happened in the past that's leading to date this. If he had not been raised by those parents, if that elder brother had never existed, and if he had not attended that school, he could have had a brighter life. The youth had been trying to participate in the discussion as cool headedly as possible, but now his many years of pent up feelings came bursting out. Hmm. So life is not a competition and you have to find your comrades. On that note, let's meditate for some time and meditation coming right on. See you in the next video. Please like, share, and comment. Do write what you feel about these and feel inspired. If you have book suggestions, give me. If you feel like you want to discuss this with me, please write to me. Lots of love. Bye bye. Close your eyes, bring yourself in a graceful posture. Bring your attention to your breath. Take your own time. And if you feel like you can rub your palms, bring them over your eyes and face. And welcome back.